All right, Devin, give us a shout when we're live.
Okay.
We'll get this underway.
Okay, the live stream is available.
Thank you very much, Devin. All right, we'll call to order the July 20th meeting of the Tecumseh School Board. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Becky Brooks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
States
America
of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on our agenda tonight, good news. The Tecumseh High School graduation. Mr. Hilderly, you had some prepared remarks.
Yeah, let's talk about probably the best thing that's happened in Tecumseh Public Schools in 4 months. I know 3 of the 4 of you here were there on Sunday, and certainly have your own impressions, but I gotta say, I enjoyed a very good day yesterday reading social media posts and then sharing lots of congratulations. If you look back, just one issue of the Tecumseh Herald, as of a week and a half ago, we were still planning to use the outdoor stadium and splitting our group up into maybe 4 different groups with a couple of tickets per kid, and really concerned about how that was going to go. The student body was very interested in having their whole group together. And once Griff and I had the conversation about using the parking lot, it just went off in his head, and he said, "Rick, I got this figured out. Now I know how we're going to do this." And that was on a Thursday, and by Sunday night last week, he had all of the details. He had all the volunteers that he needed from his staff, which I'll say something about in just a moment. But he had his sound and video in place. He had the crane, the tents, the format, and then he worked that next week on the fine details with Mr. Dolson and with Mr. Anastasov, and again, all of the volunteers from the high school. Now, later that morning after graduation, Griff confided that some of the area schools that he's been in contact with, some of the principals lamented that they were having trouble getting staff members to come out as volunteers to help with whatever format it was that their particular school was going to deliver the graduation ceremony. And we did not. Griff had zero trouble getting volunteers, and had in some cases 2 and 3 people for every job, simply because they wanted to be involved and wanted to be a part of it. And we're so glad that they were. I have not had anything even close to a neutral comment or thought shared with me or read anything on social media. I think that the format and the way that it was organized and implemented was really, under the circumstances, the absolute best that we could do for our kids. And when you're doing that, if you're doing the best that you can, I think people really want to celebrate it. So congratulations, not only to the class of 2020 and their families, but to Griff and the staff at the high school for really hitting it out of the park with the graduation ceremony on Sunday.
Let me unmute myself. Indeed, the ceremony was It wasn't the usual, not the normal for sure, but it was a nice return to something that represented it. You know, it definitely felt like a graduation, and that was a wonderful thing to have after the spring we've had. Hold on just a second.
I thought he did an amazing job. It was great. And we really enjoyed the senior parade. Maybe we should make that a normal thing.
I've heard from several people attending graduation gatherings over the weekend that, gosh, that's if there's one thing that sticks through this, that might be a new tradition that we want to implement, and that would be great. The whole event was very well attended and well received and conceived, and be happy to have that be part of a new Tecumseh tradition.
That was a lot of fun.
All right. That is going to take us to our public comment. We had one person for the public comment. Let me get her admitted here to our meeting. Is she with us? Michelle, are you with us? Michelle?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can indeed hear you. You're welcome to turn your camera on if you would like to use the camera also. It is your discretion.
Okay. All right, good.
We've got you. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So,
I got a little freeze up on her.
Yeah, we do.
Sorry,
I was waiting to see if it would come.
I'm here today. Come see. Let's see. Let me go closer to my house. Okay. Better?
You're coming through now. We're not freezing up.
Yeah,
Good
okay. It
evening.
might be too. All right. Oh, my name. So this is Michelle Beaton. Okay. I'm here today representing the Tecumseh Equity Committee.
Got a little freeze up on her.
Yeah, we do.
Sorry,
I was waiting to see if it would come.
Maybe I should come see. Let's see. Better?
Yes, I think
Better.
you're good there.
Testing, testing. Okay, try it inside. Our mission is to promote awareness and conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion in Tecumseh Public Schools. We are working to create a safe learning environment for all students by encouraging the TPS administration to implement anti-racist policies, support LGBTQ+ and biopic students, support TPS teachers and staff through diversity, equity, and inclusion training and professional development, which we have been talking about with you guys. So, all right, part one. Okay, so I'm here today to encourage you to include the Neola language on racial harassment in all of the school handbooks. We need the student handbooks, which are signed by the students, to be updated to include detailed information that's written out for them to see, which outlines specifically what would constitute as racial bullying and harassment. Currently, there's only a small paragraph written out in the handbooks. And then at the end, it says to go to the district website, for more detailed information. So I've looked for it, and it is quite the process to actually find. And obviously, one would need, internet access, a device, and presumably some time and privacy to even be able to try to locate the information. So the students, we think, should be able to easily see this information and understand exactly what it is. They also need to know how to report cases and to whom. We already know that bullying and racial harassment is an issue here, and it should not be met with vagueness and be footnoted as not relevant enough to even be fully written out. Schools schools have an obligation to create and maintain a safe learning environment for all students, which we know, you guys try to do. So we're recommending that the language for race and color harassment and national origin ancestry that is found in the Board of Education Policy Section 5517 be added to all of the school handbooks and to help support the safety and success of every student. And that is it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. You with us? There you are. You're still with us.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. We will take your comments into consideration.
All right.
And we will hopefully see you when we return to our physical board meetings, hopefully sometime near future. Have a good night, Michelle.
All right. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, public comments. We are on to revisions and approval of the agenda. Are there any revisions to our agenda tonight? Barring that, could I get a motion to approve the agenda as written, please?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Support.
Roll call vote. Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
John? And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous. Scheduled reports, we have our monthly finance reports. Rick, would you like to take this one?
Well, you have the details of the check register and the investments and so on. Here's my favorite part that I can tell you is that we have completed interviews for the business manager position and have found a qualified quality candidate that we're going to be talking to pretty soon about coming to work for us. So stay tuned. Got to get through that process, but we did find somebody with lots of experience and actually a local tie to the community that should be very exciting. Aside from that, I'll attempt to answer whatever questions that you might have from the information that was provided in your packet.
All right, the information was unique, a lot of refunds, a lot of non-expenditures that we usually have.
Right.
Was anybody else had a specific question about anything?
Yeah, we owed a lot of people $10 and $20 from things that were scheduled to happen in May that didn't happen, obviously. So yeah, you saw a lot of a more lengthy check register than you probably would normally see this time of year.
For sure. All right, barring any questions, we'll move on to discussion items tonight. Looks like we have a large list of things to discuss, most of them to do with the upcoming school year. I think a few of them have to do with COVID, and Rick, take it away.
Okay, you have in your packet a first draft of the TPS preparedness and response plan. This was put together pretty much in the format that was produced by the Governor's Commission on returning to school, the Return to School Roadmap. That roadmap asks districts several questions, and they break it down into how do you plan to implement things if we are in phase 1, 2, or 3 of the pandemic, and then what happens when we move to 4, which is what we're in now, and then 5 and 6, which is basically post-pandemic. So if you've read through the plan, you probably immediately noticed that really the most complicated issue is phase 4. And that's the one that we spent last week with the administration, spending most of our time trying to get our heads around, as are most school administrations at this time. From moving from 4 to 5 is not that terribly critical. Most of the requirements just drop down to strong recommendations, and then the strong recommendations drop down to recommendations. But in our plan, we will really address the issues the same pretty much across the board in phase 4 or phase 5. Dropping back into phase the 1, 2, and 3 area, that just requires us to not be in person, so return to distance learning. This time around, with accountability and with attendance, and not under some of the same guidelines that the state had under the continuity of learning plan. So certainly a much more rigorous plan if we do have to follow the distance learning portion of the plan. And then phase 4, there are things in the plan that are still going to be very difficult for us to figure out. Some of the items that are in phase 4, actually, I'm going to be careful to try not to discuss them, because they're actually things that the association has indicated they would like to negotiate because it has to do with their working conditions. And I think that that's probably going to become an issue not only in our district, but in our county and probably statewide as these plans get developed. So stay tuned. I will try to keep you advised on that. There are only, in the plan, there are only 2 areas in which the district has chosen not to follow the requirements or the strong recommendation. In this case, there are 2 pieces that are called out toward the end of the plan. One of them has to do with social distancing, and one of them has to do with the wearing of masks, both of which are in the aforementioned category of potential negotiation items for working conditions. So I won't discuss much about that at this point, just that we have some tentative plans. This is, as it reads, a draft plan for the board to consider. The requirement is that boards approve their plans on or before the 15th of August, and our next meeting is scheduled for the 10th of August. Therefore, it was necessary that we put this in front of you for this July meeting so that we could bring it back for further discussion and action on the 10th. And I can nearly guarantee that there will be changes between now and then, not only related to negotiations with our own association, but based on the conditions that as we move further into August that we may or may not be in. So there's lots of detail in there. You've only had the weekend to read it over. If you have any preliminary questions or opinions about it at this point, I can certainly take notes and write down what your questions might be, but I may not have solid answers for all of it at this point. The draft that we presented to you is the draft that the entire county of schools was provided. We're trying to work through this plan in a similar fashion. We have students who share LISD facilities, and we have LISD staff who report to a variety of facilities around the county. So we're trying to keep conditions in each of the districts very similar, if not exactly the same. So the format that you're looking at tonight is the same format that folks in Onstead and Blissfield and so on and so forth, their boards should be looking at as well. So that's kind of a general overview. I know that you probably have some questions and thoughts, and like I said, I can write those things down, and maybe I have an answer, but maybe I'll have to get back to you with an answer later on.
All right, John, you had a question or comment?
He answered it for the most part. I just wanted to make sure that we were doing things similar to the other districts, you know, in the LISD, because that was one of our concerns, is we didn't want, you know, one school doing things differently than others and creating, you know, some competition, I guess is what it would do.
Yeah. One thing that I want to mention, this is somewhat related to what you mentioned, Mr. Bensing, but regardless of whatever phase we're in, whether we are allowed to be face-to-face and it's phase 4 or phase 5, or if we're in phase 3, regardless of whatever the situation is, our Tecumseh Virtual Academy allows us to provide an online service with high quality that will transfer back to our curriculum in person throughout this pandemic. So, you know that I have put out a survey to the district, and we have had remarkable response to the survey. Over 2,200 of our 2,700 students are represented by the answers in this survey. So it's a highly reliable survey. And what that is telling us is roughly 30% of parents are very interested to see what our online learning plan is like and could potentially opt to start the school year in the virtual setting. So the Tecumseh Virtual Academy we've had it for 10 years. It's got the curriculum. If we have to move staff from in-person instruction to the online version because we want to provide both, we can do that. And I'm going to be stressing that point in a video that I'll be producing and sending out to our district tomorrow, because I know that people are concerned about it, and I want to be clear. This doesn't have to be an either or choice for people, that we do have the ability to go online, even if we're going to offer in-person instruction. And I bring that up related to your question, John, because many of the districts in the county are scrambling to create what we already have and have been doing for several years. And that is a virtual academy of their own. But Tecumseh Public Schools is poised and ready, and we'll be promoting that fact not only within our organization but outside as well.
The second half of my question deals exactly with that, and that is, have we started doing signups, and are we going to get the information out there to have a sign up start date and end date so we have time to get staffed properly?
Yeah. I don't want to do that too early because honestly, I want to just caution parents to wait another week or 10 days and let's see what conditions are going to be like when we start the school year. Lansing Public Schools was the first district in Michigan, and I know Ann Arbor Public is very much considering this, but some schools are already considering starting the school year in an online environment. So if that becomes the case, then there isn't a need for people to change their registration to TVA. So I am going to ask parents to give it a little bit of time, and let's see what conditions are like in a couple of weeks. It's very fluid, changes potentially by the day, and the registration process to move them over to the TVA is not very difficult. So waiting until the first week of August should not cause them any concern. There will still be plenty of time to get them registered and for us to develop a staffing plan.
Becky?
Well, I don't want to touch on anything that's still a discussion item, I guess. I've had an opportunity to speak to several community members. Some are former and current teachers. and kind of listen to what they've had to say. And so what I'm hearing from you is let's wait till August 1st to see where we're at before we have this discussion. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I don't mind having the discussion, and I'm happy to share information with people. We've got a really, really quality virtual academy, and I'm happy to move people over if that's what they want to do. But I do feel like we're in phase 4 right now. If you looked at phase 4 as a continuum, on that continuum, I would say as we sit here on the 20th of July, that the state of Michigan is closer to the phase 3 end of that continuum than we are the phase 5 end of that continuum. And that's why I encourage people to just wait a few more days and let's see which way that trend goes. If people are careful and keeping distance from others and so on and so forth, and our numbers restabilize, then we should talk seriously about, okay, who's comfortable with moving forward and who would like to be in the online environment. I just don't think on the 20th of July, we're quite there yet. We're just not past the halfway mark of the summer. Even though that school start date seems imminent, we're still about 7 weeks away. So I'm just going to encourage people to give it a little bit more time and wait and see, because there is time right now.
That's fair. I think that for literally the hours of time that I spent, the main thing we discovered was every can we open is a can of worms. Every hole we go down is a rabbit hole. There's more questions than there can possibly be answers right now.
It's definitely a bit of a minefield, but we're doing our best to cover every possible contingency. There's just a few things that we need to know in order to provide answers, and I think the most important one of those is funding.
Of course. And
Right now, there are ideas out there, and there's a plan that's being tossed around, but nothing's been approved. And until we know exactly what dollar amounts we're going to have to implement things, many things are up in the air.
And I mean, of course, that's to be expected. One of the biggest concerns is, we had a big concern last year about the cleanliness at Compass. With that having been a problem pre-COVID,
Right.
you can imagine the level of concern now. If we couldn't, and I know we're looking at changing that, the way that's done, but that's a piece that needs to be really shared, I guess,
Yeah.
as to how we're going to handle that.
And the thing that complicates that a little bit, I know because you've looked at the plan, but the cleaning protocols that are required, ask us to do some disinfecting when kids change classes.
Right.
So one of the things that we're working on is really reducing the amount of time that kids change classes. So in other words, keeping kids in their cohorts for most of the day, because the plan does make some accommodations for the fact that if a group does not mingle with other groups of kids, that some of those things don't have to happen as often. So, we have some pretty good ideas on how we can cohort things at certain levels, but other levels that becomes more difficult. For instance, the high school. So getting those cohort issues worked out and figuring out just exactly how much cleaning that we're going to have to do is one of those question marks that all districts that I know of that I've spoken to still haven't wrapped their heads around. I was on a Zoom call on Thursday. Actually, the entire administrative team was watching that Zoom as well, where we heard two of the members of the governor's panel admit that they don't see how in-person music instruction, specifically band and choir, how that fits in with social distancing. So I've got to have a conversation later this week with our music instructors to talk about, instruments like trumpets and so on that emit potentially respiratory droplets, singing in a small area, that sort of thing. So
Well,
there's
while we're having that discussion, let's find out how we're doing football then too.
the MHSAA was given a lot of power by the commission to make those
I'm
determinations,
sorry, if you can't blow a trumpet, you can't play football.
and
It's-
it's the MHSAA is doing what they need to do to keep kids ready in case things change. So
That's right.
I understand them coming out and having the position that we're going to continue to move forward and plan for a season, because they at this point they can't put on the brakes and then August 20th say, hey, let's play.
Without conditioning. I understand that.
So
That makes sense.
the conditioning has to move forward and they have to be ready. And again, I'm not an MHSAA insider. I have contacts and I have conversations, but in my opinion, that's the reason for their thinking and for their actions is we have to be prepared in case things go our way.
Has there been any discussion in the, you may not be able to share this, but another concern, and certainly, I understand, if someone's exposed and they have to quarantine, what does that do to their sick time? So these are kind of all things
Yep.
that are.
Yeah, and that would be one of those things that we're going to have to negotiate and talk to the association about. There is language in the extensive number of executive orders that relates to that, but I don't know if it was updated past the continuity of learning plan and included in the Ready for School roadmap. So that's another one of those little hot sparklers that still hasn't cooled down.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, John. Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, Suzanne, who was up next? Was it John? John is up next. Before John jumps on there, I'm going to touch back just a minute on a couple of things that you talked about. The first was our virtual academy. As you noted, we've had that for 10 years. We've got plenty of background in it and an established program. And I don't want to marginalize the process by saying it's this simple, but moving from the classroom environment, being enrolled in the physical school, if parents want to go to that TVA and get enrolled, it is almost as simple as when you change your schedule the first day of school in high school. Almost. I mean, there's a little bit more involved and there's some asset reallocation that has to occur.
Right.
But the process for parents, this isn't a decision that they have to make tomorrow. They could make it immediately before school. We'd prefer more notice so we could allocate the resources. But the process is quick and it is something that's established. We're not in uncharted territory with the TVA.
Right. And I plan on giving parents plenty of time to make that choice and to change that registration. One of the things that I also should mention is that part of the curriculum that is already established within our TVA is through a company called Edmentum. And Edmentum also provides at no further cost, and it doesn't matter how many kids you do this with, but they provide a diagnostic tool. And in the past, we have used NWEA K8 as diagnostics as a way to measure growth through the year. And some of it was information for parents and students. And a lot of it was information for us internally in terms of how kids are growing and so forth. This Edmentum diagnostic is something that we will be using throughout the district for every student, regardless of whether they're in the TVA or outside in in-person instruction. The reason we're going to do that is precisely because we may be going in and out of online instruction, but the Edmentum will be the pre and post test for the school year that every kid will be a part of. So if a family does choose to be within TVA until things seem or feel better, when they come out and at the end of the school year, they're still going to be assessed and growth will be measured based on the same indicators. And that's really a nice feature that is provided through the TVA that we'll be using throughout the district. We're actually going to not spend the money on NWEA this year so that we can save that for other curriculum purchases to support online learning. But that diagnostic tool will allow us to do a lot in terms of having people go into the TVA and come out, or even if they don't, still be able to assess them in a similar way that we do the kids that will be in the TVA.
And the other thing I wanted to reach back on was the, I don't want to call them extracurriculars. Obviously, orchestra, band, choir, even the phys ed classes, the gym classes are dramatically impacted by this. If we go back to school and we're in, 4 or 5, there really isn't a way to have those classes continue as they have in the past.
Yeah.
There'll be workarounds, I'm sure. There's creative workarounds.
Yeah,
But-
sharing art supplies is another one. If you cohort kids, you really have to have those, we've been calling them MAPS classes. I used to call them encores in the middle school, specials, electives, whatever. But if you cohort kids, then you really have to have those teachers coming into the classroom and not kids going out. So those are logistical things that still have to get worked out in detail. And we've got a framework for it, but, passing that to the staff and then, having them shoot holes into the plan and then plug those holes to make sure that it's sound. All those things have to happen. And we know that we can get it done and will get it done, but right now there's still lots of questions that aren't going to be able to be answered right away. But the preparedness response plan is what the state wants us to have ready to say, these are the conditions we're going to work under and that we're going to hold people to. And that's what we filled out.
And to that end, it is important that we get that information out there to the parents and community that wherever we are in the school, if we're at social distancing, kids 6 feet apart and wearing masks, that's going to carry through to, and it's going to, again, dramatically affect things, school field trips. Obviously, you can't have people wrestling for sports if you have them 6 feet apart in a school. Whatever standards we have in our curriculum classes are going to be carried out through school dances, athletics, field trips.
Yeah.
It might indeed cancel some of those things while we're in that state. It's important to note that going back to school does not mean going back to school as it was or what we consider a normal school with all of the attributes.
Right. Yeah. Return to school in phase 4 is really a minimalist approach. It cancels a lot of those activities you mentioned. One of the things you mentioned was field trips. In phase 4, you may not have field trips. And we carried that in our plan. We carried that it's a strong recommendation in phase 5, and we carried that into phase 5. If we got that far, we still wouldn't have any field trips. That's just one of those mines in the minefield that you can control and see coming. So you just don't plan for it.
Don't take the risk. John, you had a comment? Question? You're muted.
Yeah, Rick had Rick had mentioned something about some larger schools like Ann Arbor and Lansing going, just choosing now to go to straight virtual. And I just want to make sure that we're going to look at this a little bit differently than some of those bigger districts like Lansing and Ann Arbor because of our location and just the effect that this has had on our area, and not necessarily jump to following schools like Ann Arbor and Lansing, depending on what they choose. The other piece of the virtual academy that you were hitting on, I'm not so worried about the sign up piece of it. I'm more worried about the infrastructure side of it, to make sure we have staffed properly, to make sure that we have enough computers for the kids that need them, to make sure, I don't know if we're going to have bandwidth issues with the servers or anything like that. So there's more to it than just the sign up piece of it that I just want to make sure we don't miss, because, quite often when things like this launch, it's the first day and you've got people calling in, trying to get logged in, and it can be a disaster. So the more time we have to plan, I think the better off we'll be.
Right, that's a good point, because I mentioned a percentage earlier. Roughly a third of our families may choose to start in the TVA. Well, that's 900 kids. That's, like you said, Chromebooks and internet accessibility and all of those issues. So we do want to give ourselves enough time to plan for that. But again, I think we have about 10 days before we're at the point where we have to get started on that.
All right, Suzanne?
I just basically want to say that I'm glad we have two paths, and we already had two paths pretty much ready, and that we have the flexibility to move staff. If teachers feel unsafe coming back and they feel like they're compromised, maybe they can, move into the internet or the virtual academy side of things. But I just want to stress that we follow the science and that we stay, in our lane, of course, with safety precautions, and that we offer something as close to normal in every respect, and that we make it even, whether if it doesn't make sense that you can blow a tuba, but you can wrestle, of course, that's a problem. If you can wrestle, you can blow a tuba. So I don't want to shortchange any of our students for any, whether it's art or music or a sport. I want to do it all if it's within our reach and to the best of our ability with the precautions we have to take. And I want to follow the science, and the science tells us that this population, and not so much the teachers, but the children, are at an extremely low risk of this virus, and that we need to do what's right by them. I worry about the 3 months of school they've already missed. And I was really glad to hear, Rick, that you're going to be watching these students and making sure we do everything we can to make sure they haven't missed anything or haven't fallen behind. And I'm glad we're interjecting a lot of common sense here. And I just think we need to follow the science, and we need to provide as close to what we have always provided as possible. And that's really all I have to say.
Right, and that I mentioned that diagnostic, and that's exactly in this case why it's important to use the tool that we're going to use, because it does allow us to really focus on the individual needs of each kid. And to John's point, yeah, Ann Arbor Public and Lansing Public they're in areas where their concerns and their numbers are a lot different than ours. And Lenawee County is, while it's not COVID free, it's certainly at this point at a lesser risk than other areas in the state. And we want to stay that way, but we also want to offer a program that reflects that we could do some more things than maybe other places can't.
All right, we have any more on the topic of our return to school roadmap?
The next time that it'll come up at the board will be the first meeting in August, but that won't be the next time that you hear from me about changes that we may add to the plan or details for families. And then again, I'll be talking with various members of our staff to just make sure that we have as many things organized as we can. Hopefully it'll run as well as our graduation did.
Hopefully. All right, let's move on to our draft building handbooks. For this, we actually have copies of last year's handbooks. The changes to them mostly carry forward from our updating of our school district policy and board policies. The handbooks weren't really out of date, but our policies we know were. And as we update the policies and we get current on language, that's going to bleed through. And that's primarily what has happened here. Rick, would you like to touch on a specific point or two?
Well, you've got the document. Luckily, the list of changes district-wide are only about 1.25 pages long. The first one has to do with Early Learning Center and the building of choice requests. We're really going to try to isolate that to just a very few circumstances that are outlined there. A parent working in a particular building and wants to take their own child there. We do have staff that sometimes transfer around based on their position in the district. Or the next item might be a student bus pickup. Perhaps a family member or a daycare is in a different area of the district, and they can select a building of choice based on that. And again, we're really only talking about the ELCs that have the building of choice. Or they may be grandfathered because a previous family member went through that school and then a family home has changed locations and they want to return to the place where their other siblings are going or have gone to school. But those are going to be the restrictions that we're going to implement in the handbook language about choosing buildings in the ELCs. The STEAM Center handbook will remain in place for 1 more year. It'll primarily address grades 7 and 8. So anywhere that it refers to East, it's really referring to the 7th grade students that will be housed at Compass. We'll update as much of that as possible, but it really makes more sense to create the new middle school handbook that will be in place for 21, 22. This portion addresses our public comment speaker, who I think will be happy. I hope she's watching, and other members of her committee, that we are going to increase the amount of detail that we list in all of our handbooks about harassment. Right now, there's a simple statement about harassment in general, but our policy digs more specifically into these areas that break down into race and color harassment, religious harassment, national origin and ancestry harassment, and disability harassment. That's all language that we didn't have to create. It's in our policy manual. We simply copy it and carry it over and list it in the handbook. Now, there's quite a lot more in that policy that relates to not only the reporting mechanism, but the investigation procedures. That's not stuff that we need to print in our handbook. That only becomes necessary if there's an issue. And Troon's response to my inquiries about that are, you're perfectly fine with referring to your policy manual that's attached to your website. Honestly, if you have a kid who's old enough to carry a phone, and you ask them to refer to their handbook, they're probably going to go through the internet and show you the handbook that's attached to our website, rather than look around in a backpack or maybe tell you that it's in their school locker, because that's where their printed copy is. So I don't have reservations about saying that the reporting mechanism and the investigation procedures are detailed on our website. But we're calling out these specific areas of harassment and giving a broader definition for all students and all parents to recognize. So that's a change that will be in our handbooks. And then finally, we will have a statement in the handbook that essentially says that there may be school policies that are in the handbook now that will be overridden by the board approved preparedness and response plan. I couldn't possibly detail to you what exactly those are, but we will have a statement that essentially says, if we trip over one of our own policies in the enforcement of that plan, that plan trumps anything else that we have done in the past. So those are our proposed changes for the school building handbooks. If you have any questions about those or thoughts about something else that we should be addressing, please let me know.
John?
I just thought maybe something that might enforce this a little bit, or, you know, drive it down to the kids a little bit more, would be to have a signature page where the student and the parent both sign that page, make it the front page or the back page of the handbook, and have them, you know, return it to school and hand it to their
Right.
homeroom teacher. Typically, when you get buy-in from the parent and the student, and they, you know, there's something about signing that contract that enforces it a little bit more.
Right. There is, I believe that there's an acknowledgement page in each of the handbooks now. I believe it's toward the end of the handbooks that we have had them go to the website and download. I think that it'd probably be simpler if we just sent the form to them through our Blackboard alert system, and they got a direct email, and they wouldn't have to go looking for it.
Yeah, something that makes it simple.
Agree.
All right. I see no one else commenting on that, so we'll move on to our childcare handbook, which I believe we just received today.
Yeah, and I just received it today from Mrs. Leip, so I don't think that I would be able to handle any questions at this point, but she did tell me that if you do have questions about any of the changes, that she'll be happy to address those for our next meeting.
All right. Were there any questions anybody wish to forward on about the childcare? I know it's kind of short notice. It's a piece that we just got today, so.
Yeah, we've all just received, it, so even if,
Maybe by the next meeting.
She's also listening, so if you had any questions, she will.
oh, is she here? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do have another.
You know, we didn't get a summary of the changes, right?
For the
I
childcare
don't have a summary
specifically?
of changes. She briefly told me what the additions are, that they broadened some of their procedures based on the pandemic. So
Okay.
I think anything that's in there now is COVID related that wasn't in there before.
Okay.
And we'll be able to discuss it more. We'll have more time to look it over between now and our next meeting.
Yep.
So for sure, if anything pops up question wise, send that email off, get it to Rick, get it to me, and we'll get it answered by the next meeting. District Chromebook policies and procedures.
This is a project that started shortly after I got here, that Greg Lewis worked on pretty diligently with Devin, and I'm going to let Devin review that. It is a working draft. We don't have it exactly right, and it's primarily because when this when conversation started about this document, we were talking about Chromebooks that we were going to implement 7/12. And now we're talking about possibly having as low as third grade on our Chromebooks in some form um, because of the possibility of moving in and out of virtual. So I don't think that this necessarily completely addresses that issue because it's a new deal. He does have some good news about the Chromebooks, however, so I'll let you lead with that, Devin.
Yeah, I will. I'll start out with that. We are expecting delivery of 900 Chromebooks tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of work to get those unboxed, enrolled, up to date, all of that. But it's great that we get an early start on it. So I'm really excited about that.
Good. Now, this Chromebook policy, did we build this off of the framework of our old Chromebook policy, or is this all brand new?
No, this is a distilled down version of what we had before. I just updated some of the language, updated some of the fees to reflect what the cost is now as far as replacement parts, and added in just a few things here and there on specific types of damage that we saw during the school year.
All right, so an evolution then.
Yes.
The biggest thing that I think, and maybe Devin would agree with me, I hope we're on the same page here, but the critical thing that we needed to address was repairs and insurance and cost issues. That there was a time in the not too distant past when new devices were just being handed to kids without question about whether or not they had paid their insurance and so on. And enforcement of that had turned into a pretty large issue. So that's where we're really trying to get to with a lot of this is when something breaks, who's going to pay for it, how much and when.
All right, are there any other questions about the Chromebook policy? All right, well, we'll take a little pause here. Suzanne had to step away for a minute, and with that, we have definitely lost a quorum. I think I would prefer to wait until she gets back to her screen before we continue with the meeting.
John or Becky, a musical number? Have you got anything prepared or?
I got
figured
nothing.
Go ahead, John, take it away.
Nope, I got nothing.
I was actually going to talk to Devin for a second. When our kids first got their Chromebooks, we had to pay a $30 insurance fee. Whatever happened with that? Are we supposed to be paying that every year? We never heard any more about it.
Yeah, Rick and I have discussed this, and the insurance fee is an annual fee. It is non-refundable if you leave the district, and it goes towards that self-insurance pool that we use to fund the replacement parts.
I know we've discussed about, monitoring our equipment and putting some things into place. I can tell you, I have a daughter that'll be a junior next year, and I've paid that fee once.
Yes.
And you've replaced her machine once.
Yes, so there wasn't a standard policy across buildings. There was a lot of miscommunication at the beginning of last year. We hope to iron out all the wrinkles for this school year.
Okay.
Rick,
Yes.
Rick, basically the insurance policy should be passed, the onus of that should be passed down to the building administrators in each building. So I'm assuming we're going to hold them accountable for making sure this policy is followed and that they're well aware of the policy and
Exactly. Yep. Consistency in enforcement, John, has really been the issue. And that's, once you get a handle on that, then things should settle down.
Yeah, I think the issue was at the building level was where the inconsistency was. So
Agreed.
I'm assuming we won't have that issue anymore.
We are both assuming that. I can actually make that happen. So,
We're
Good.
counting on it. Devin, there had been discussion about having like monitoring, tracking on these devices. So we know that the device being turned in and, there's some kind of accountability for that. Is that in place and will that be on these new books, Chromebooks?
Absolutely. So we have asset tag stickers that we put on every single Chromebook. We're still debating on whether or not we're going to tag the power supplies. We're not sure if that's worthwhile, because of the monetary value of that. But absolutely, every device that goes out is tagged, and we keep right now it's an Excel spreadsheet of who was issued what repairs take place on each device, how often. We track all the details.
Okay, thank you.
Devin, we had talked earlier about pushing this into the management of the inventory and repairs into the new maintenance management system that we introduced to the district last year. Is there any plan to get that going? I realize before school might be a tall order.
Yes, so we're still working on the details of that. The problem is time. At some point, it would be nice to carry all of that into the asset management system. Just getting it done right now.
All right. I assumed it was time related.
Yes.
John?
Going back to the whole power supply issue, is there a way that we can get the kids to label or write on their power supplies? Because I know that one of the issues that I've heard of is that kids are constantly saying, well, I don't know which one's mine, or, I left mine at home or whatever. What if we had the kids, first day of school when they get their Chromebooks, write their last name on their power supply with like a silver Sharpie or something that won't rub off?
We could do that. It's a little bit time consuming to clean off ink or labels when we reuse these power supplies down the road. Ideally, what we would like is for the students to charge the devices at home the evening before. A properly maintained Chromebook should hold a charge all day with no problem. So ideally, the charger would stay at home.
Maybe we should stress that with the Chromebook policy letter.
Yes, I'm almost positive that's in there, but I will confirm.
Okay.
yeah,
Maybe put it in huge letters.
yeah.
Hey, Devin, along with that, the Chromebook policy letter and such, are you going to have a best practices sheet that goes out with all the Chromebooks? Just kind of an FYI, bring parents up to speed or students up to speed on best practices for operation and maintenance of it?
Sure. Yeah, we could put together an infographic type sheet to let them know all the, simple questions and answers, things like that.
That could save us some time in the future for sure.
Absolutely.
I'll add just one more thing about the whole topic, and I think that this is something that Devin feels too. Most of our kids don't have Chromebook issues. Most kids don't. They won't have a repair or a break, accidental on purpose, mischievous. Most of our kids negotiate the process just fine.
Yep.
The ones who do have those problems, there's a percentage that have enough so that we have to address these issues. So a thanks to everybody who's doing things right, but these things go into place for the ones who don't, and it's a minority.
Yes.
All right. I don't see any other questions or comments, so thank you very much, Devin.
Welcome.
We're going to move on to our 2020-2021 athletic ticket prices and athletic participation. This is it's a necessary document, and it's all in question at this point still. So
It could very well be a moot point, but the board needs to address it regardless. So it's in your packet. No point in kicking it around too much. It's just there for approval in case we need it.
and indeed, there's nothing spectacular here. It's the usual, $5 adults, $2 kids. No big changes there. The only real changes are the pay to play fees that are in there, pay to participate. And those aren't really striking. I think they're actually lower than they are in our neighboring counties and districts. So nothing spectacular there. I think we've already discussed all those before. Any questions? Comments, concerns? Going once, twice. On to food prices.
I don't, Terry, the food prices didn't change, right? Yeah. So they're in
Just in
line.
case they're there in case we have school.
Yep. And, even if we're in the virtual environment again, we're still probably, we're going to follow through with food service. I don't know what the circumstances around that will be, but we'll certainly be prepared for any contingency with this approval.
All right, and then we have our facility use fee schedule, which depending on where we are, we might not be. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I missed Suzanne. Let me back this up a little bit. Suzanne?
Yeah, I just had a question for Rick. I wanted to know if I heard they were being flexible with the food and that, it could be possible that kids might eat in their own classroom and that food service would use carts, maybe like hospitals use, and deliver the food right to the room.
Yeah.
That's true?
Yeah, that'll be part of the plan that we'll implement. That's also part of that cohorting of kids, is to take the food to them so that they're out of their classrooms as little as possible. It's possible to use the cafeteria for food service as long as you socially distance. But when you do that, and for lack of a better term, you basically cross-contaminate, because you're bringing cohorts of kids who have spent all the rest of their day separate and bringing them into the same location. And that changes some of the requirements in the plan. So our approach is to not use our cafeterias for eating.
Yeah, I just thought that was a good idea.
I should say, except at the high school.
Right. I just thought that was a very good idea, and it was a good solution to, they're not mingling so much.
Yep. So that'll drastically reduce. It was always, I think, an excitement when fourth grade kids came to fifth grade at the middle school, the amount of choice went from 2 lunch choices to several different things that you could eat. But that's unfortunately going away for not only kids, but folks like me. The reduced number of choices, and going to try to implement a program through maybe a Google Doc process where kids sign up. And again, this is an assumption that we're in person, but they would do their lunch sign up the afternoon before and for the next day, so that they could prepare their food counts and give them more time to get things set up.
Well, kind of like you would do at a hospital setting. You choose your food, you pick from a menu, and then you choose the day before or whatever. And then
Without all the sickness though, right, Suzanne?
No sickness.
All
Okay,
right. Sorry about that, Suzanne. Moving on to our facility use schedule. This is another item that we have to approve. The fees for anyone to use our facilities. However, it should be publicly noted that if we're trying to keep our buildings clean and we're worried about the health of our students, we're probably not going to rent out our buildings a whole lot and have groups of people come in. But the facility fees are there, and I don't think there's much of a change there. Is there, Rick?
There's not.
Same as they have been.
No change, Jim.
should there be a change for increased cost of cleaning?
Well, if it comes down to that, I think we're just not going to rent them out if there's that much risk. That's going to be the bottom line. We're not going to.
What if there's not that much risk, but what if we just need to follow procedure and clean very thoroughly, and we still want to rent our facilities out? Because that behooves us to do that, and we maybe need to increase the cost to cover cleaning.
I think if we get to that transitional point where we're comfortable enough to rent out our facilities, but there is still some concern, the board will revisit it at that point and say, this is the point we're at, but we're going to have to tack on a fee or something, and
Right.
we'll have to approve it then.
We had a.
The policy manual also allows me to adjust it as needed. So if somebody needed an answer on short time and we didn't have a board meeting to address it, that between Tom and I, we could figure the cost difference and assess that fee.
We did have baseball teams at our facilities over the weekend at the high school. And they obviously were renting our facilities, and it was not high school teams, because I stopped and asked a couple kids when I drove through to see the crane and all the setup for the high school. So we did rent it out as recently as this last weekend, at least our outside baseball facilities, which might not even need any extra cleaning, but we are obviously still renting them out. So this is something we should.
We did have I believe there were travel leagues that were in there.
Right.
We did have them using our fields. However, with no sanctioned school sports using those fields right now, there really isn't a need to, let's say, clean the dugouts. You know, it's just sort of we're renting our outside facilities, not inside, and they're facilities that we're not using.
But if they're renting our outside facilities and we need to clean the dugouts and charge them for that, then we need to put
Yeah,
that.
they're self-clean, pre and post.
Okay. All right. So they did it. Whoever used it.
Yep.
Okay.
And as I said, with no students using those facilities right now, the concern level is not where it is if somebody's, say, coming inside and renting out our gymnasium for a party or something. Right? There's a different risk factor there.
Right.
John?
I just wanted to go back. I mean, this, I guess, is some type of moving document, so we can change it at any time, because it sounded like it was something we needed to approve right now.
If we approve it at the start of the school year, and those are our assumed costs, but if our costs go up, you have the ability to adjust that fee schedule anytime. And like I said, the policy manual also allows between the facility director and myself to adjust the cost as needed as well.
Right. This is setting the base costs for the year, making an assumption. And if it needs to change, the board will just address it and take a vote to change it so we meet any additional costs. And in the short term, they have the authority at the administrative level to change it if it needs to be done in a hurry. So it's like anything else. We have the authority to change it mid-year or anytime we feel like it, just based on need.
Yeah, it seems easier to make the changes now instead of putting additional things on the plate of Rick and other people to, go back and adjust these prices for the cleaning fees. Because I agree with Suzanne, it's going to cost more money to rent out facilities. So I get that it's kind of a moot point, or could be a moot point, but also we don't want to have our administrators chasing these rental requests around to figure out what they actually should charge versus just having it taken care of in the beginning.
Rick, how many rental requests do we get?
Well, currently none, but during a normal school year, our facilities are full. Anytime that we're not using them, somebody probably is.
Rick, might I suggest that as part of our COVID response document, our planning and preparedness document, maybe we should include in there a moratorium on renting our facilities unless we rise to a certain rate of safety, whatever stage you want to call that. Definitely not in stage 4. We should not be renting it out, but just putting something in there, and that'll kind of alleviate the question, and there won't have to be calculations, because it'll be clear that we're not renting them out when we have a heightened risk to our students. Because that's really the bottom line
Okay.
here. If we
Yeah,
have to clean that hard, we shouldn't do it.
we can look back into the executive orders and see if there's already a language about that that eliminates it. So I'll advise the board at the August meeting, and there's plenty of time to, if you wanted to put off the decision until the 24th of August, we're still outside the start of the school year to do that. So I'll get you more information about how we might address it.
All right, thank you, Rick. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, our last discussion item is, no, I'm sorry, next to last. We are on the proposed board meeting schedule, which is here somewhere. Hold on just a sec. There it is. Has everyone had a chance to look at that meeting schedule? John, have you had an opportunity to look that over?
I haven't.
All right, well, I think,
I mean, it is what it is. We all try our best to get to every meeting, but we're obviously not always going to make it. So
Yeah, there's really nothing new in there. Second and fourth Mondays, unless it involves a holiday or a vacation that it falls on.
I mean, one of the things I will say is when we first started this 2 meetings a month, our process was going to be to discuss items in the first meeting and vote on them in the second meeting. And I feel like we're just continuously discussing and voting. So we really haven't stuck to that original plan. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point. And sometimes I don't know if we necessarily need 2 meetings a month. So it is what it is, but the original purpose of the 2 meetings a month was to discuss items in the first meeting and then vote, have time, have that 2-week period to research them and then vote on them in the second meeting.
indeed, there have been cases today, for example. We do have action items on the facility use schedule and such. I think mostly these are carryover items. I mean, we're getting there and there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but a lot of the stuff that we have action on at the same time it's introduced is either time critical or it's carryover action. It's not anything that requires a lot of research or if it does, as we have in the past, we can always take that right out of the agenda and push it off into a future meeting.
I do agree with John. I think as a rule, we should have a discussion and then the next week, and it should be a rarity where we have to rush something through, and it should be because something didn't get brought up but I think we should strive to do that. And I think we should strive to have our complete package by Thursday night. So we have a good 4 days to review everything. That's just, I know we're in very odd circumstances right now with the state of affairs.
Right.
So it's been
Well,
very odd.
in terms of the format and how things happen during the school year, you may have a proposal or a project or something that comes up.
Right.
And somebody requests to be on the next board agenda, and the next board agenda is supposed to be an action item meeting, so it goes on as a discussion during an action item. So you end up, like we typically do, have some discussion and some action items at each meeting. But the theory still holds that an item has to be on for discussion first and then wait until the next meeting to be an action item. I think that is certainly easier for us to maintain than to see if there's a structure where we purely have one discussion meeting and one action meeting. Just because things tumble around in the wash during the year and don't always come up at the right time.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. There's always going to be a mix, but
you
For the
should
most
leave a
part.
month in between, or a meeting in between where it
Yes,
comes on as a discussion item and we only move it to action if there are circumstances why we have to.
right, yeah. Just a goal.
Becky?
I was just gonna say, I think Rick has worked to try and make that a regular practice for us. There's been a couple times that he's made mention of that he's putting something on as a discussion, and we'll have to, wait until the next meeting to act on it or whatever. And of course, things don't always fall perfectly. But I do appreciate your efforts in that. I note on here the location, of course, it says high school because we're not utilizing the board office. Provided we get to do this in person again. Did you have a location in the high school in mind?
The media center.
Okay.
You don't like the media center?
Well, I don't think we ever tried it with the mics that we have now. It used to have horrible acoustics for us, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can definitely address the sound system.
Okay.
That's, yeah, that part, we can figure that out. Certainly because the sound system that's in our boardroom here doesn't travel. It's fixed. I think that we'd be better off if we invested in a portable system that doesn't matter where we meet. The sound is going to be good.
I thought we purchased that system to use elsewhere.
We did prior to Rick's arrival have either the boardroom system that went mobile, or we had a new system. I'm not sure which it was, but we definitely upgraded from the single microphone. Remember the pass the microphone game?
Yeah.
We upgraded from that, and we definitely did have, I think it was the same system. The microphones, I think, were the same ones. I don't know. It might have been going portable with far too much equipment, but it is something that was being done prior to your arrival.
I'm gonna rely on Devin and say I know that we can get sound quality to improve in that location.
Hey, Devin.
And if not, we have our scapegoat.
We do have a portable sound system.
Okay.
Okay.
You remember how bad it was in the media center. You couldn't hear anything. So
Yeah.
Yes.
We've been in that setting, I think 3 times in my experience here. 2 of them were for interviews.
yeah.
And then once we had a meeting, and I didn't necessarily love the setup in any of those. So we'll work on that format so that the setup works well. But you got that screen down there that can pull down. That's a great way to present things. We just have to logistically move some shelving around and some tables so that it's board meeting ready on a bi-weekly basis.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'm pretty sure that we can address sound. Devin's good with those technical things. That's why he's the tech guy.
Good.
All right. Moving beyond our meeting schedule, we have the review of the annual memberships and appointments.
Kevin, I had something else.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I apologize.
I even raised my hand.
Yes, you did. I'm over here juggling the live stream and the meeting, and I'm going to lose something. It was you tonight.
2 things. We might want to think about moving these meetings to the cafetorium in the high school for social distancing and, just because it's a bigger area. That's a thought. I know we've done a few things in there before. My other thought on the scheduling is that maybe we do every other month as a 1 meeting month. So 2 meetings the first month, 1 meeting the second month. Because I feel like when we first started this process, we had to have 2 meetings a month with everything going on. Now that we've got Rick here, life's calmed down a lot. The 2 meetings aren't always necessary. So just a thought, if we went to 2 meetings 1 month, 1 meeting the next month, I think we'd get the same amount accomplished. And if we always have the, emergency meeting, if we have to have one for some odd reason.
All right, Becky?
I don't disagree with John, but I'm kind of wondering maybe with the COVID stuff, maybe this year we leave it as 2 and look to doing that next year. Just a thought.
I think it's very reasonable to say that we could reevaluate it when we get to the January organizational meeting. That would probably be a good time. We'll have the first half of the year under our belt with the COVID, and we'll know where we sit at that moment. Things might calm right down, or they might be just as hectic as they have been. So that'd probably be a good time to reevaluate it at least.
Well, COVID's going to be gone November 4th, so we'll be
Sweet.
fine.
Can't wait.
Can't wait for that.
I would suggest that it is a little more simple to cancel a meeting than it is to schedule one. So that if business looks light and the board chooses, you're only required by law to have one per month. So we can keep our options open and decide from time to time if there's light action.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I say 2 per month, and then we lighten it up if we need to, like Rick said.
All right. Let's move on to our last discussion item. We have our review of annual memberships and appointments, which, wait a minute. And I've lost that document. Rick, do you have that document in front of you?
I'm looking for it. Which one is it called?
Well,
Terry,
if I
you
knew that,
know-
I could probably find it.
I've got, maybe I scroll down. Oh, there it is.
2021
All right. You know what, Kevin? It's at the bottom. It's the meeting schedule is a 2-page document, and it's the second page.
Ah,
It's MASB membership, school equity caucus membership, MHSAA, and authorization to participate in the National School Lunch and Special Milk Program.
old special milk program. Yeah, there it is. Okay. And there's no big changes on that. It's just our usual. We're holding the same legal representation from ISD and Troon, and everything else is just our standard memberships that we have for the associations and such. Were there any questions on that? I see none. Going to move us right into our action items for tonight. First action item is the athletic ticket prices. Could I get a motion, please, Becky?
I hereby move to approve the 2020-2021 athletic ticket prices and athletic participation fees as recommended by the athletic director as follows. Adults, $5, Tecumseh students with ID, $2, non-Tecumseh students, $5, children, kindergartners, and younger, free, senior citizens, $2, season passes, $150 for the year. 2020 to 2021 pay to participation fees, high school fees, $100 for the first sport, $65 for the second sport. Middle school fees, $70 for the first sport, $40 for the second sport.
I second that emotion. That emotion. That's a song.
Was a
I want to sing that song.
Please don't.
Robinson song.
Please don't,
from the 60s
no.
Just got its way into the board meeting minutes.
Okay, I second that.
All right.
And Terry, do not put the E in front of there.
All right. We have support by Suzanne. Roll call vote. John?
Yeah, yep.
Suzanne?
Yep.
Becky?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Unanimous. Next, food prices for the year 2020 to 2021. Becky?
I hereby move to approve the 2020-2021 food prices as recommended by the food service director as follows. Tecumseh Acres and Sutton Learning Center's lunch, $2.75. Compass Learning Center lunch, $2.75. Patterson Intermediate Learning Center lunch, $2.75. High school lunch, $3.20 for a traditional meal, $3.75 for a premium meal. Milk prices, 50 cents. Breakfast prices, $1.25.
Can I
Support.
have some? Okay. Roll call vote. Becky,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Next item is the 2020-2021 facility use fee schedule. Becky?
Kevin, I'd like to put this on hold. I really think we just need to make the decision on adding a cleaning fee to this instead of just leaving it the way it is.
Are you
All
asking
right,
to
then.
table it?
I'm asking
well-
to table it, yes.
Okay, I will make a motion to remove the facility use schedule from tonight's action items and revisit discussion on this at our next board meeting.
Support?
Roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We have removed the item. It will be discussed at our next board meeting. Last action item is the approval of the annual appointments.
I move to appoint Truen Law Firm of Lansing, Michigan as our primary legal counsel for Tecumseh Public Schools and to approve the cooperative legal services agreement with the LISD and attorney Kyle Hoffman for the 2021 school year. You want me to read them all or take them each at a time?
Just go ahead and read them all off. We'll
Okay.
handle them as a consent.
All right. I move to name the following banks or depositories for the various funds of Tecumseh Public Schools for fiscal year 2021. Premier Bank. I'm sorry, Terry, the pronunciation of this was what? Mylef? Mylef. TLC Community Credit Union and Key Bank. I move to authorize the Director of Business and Financial Services as the primary signer on all checks written by Tecumseh Public Schools with the superintendent as an alternate on all district accounts. I move to authorize the superintendent and/or the Director of Business and Financial Services or his/her designee to deposit school funds in established depositories. I move to authorize the superintendent and/or the Director of Business and Financial Services or his designee to make investments of available monies from the several funds of the district and transfer monies as needed. Shall I
Suzanne,
continue?
would you like to second that emotion?
I second it.
Roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Passes unanimously.
There's a
Next item on
continuation-
our agenda.
There's a continuation of other appointments.
Oh, there is?
There is.
Okay. Go right ahead.
I move to appoint the board's elected secretary or designee to serve as chief election officer for the Tecumseh Public School District. I move to appoint the board's elected secretary or designee as the board's designee to receive and officially canvass the nominating positions for board candidates in the annual school election. I move to appoint the board's elected secretary, the superintendent, or his or her designee to serve as the board's designee for posting legal notices pursuant to the Open Meeting Act. I move to appoint the superintendent or his or her designee as the designated person for the district to oversee the responsibilities of the above referenced act, which is to coordinate for Title VI of Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title 11 of Educational Amendment 1972, Sections 504 of Rehabilitative Act of 1973, Age Discrimination Act of 1975, Title II of Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and McKinney-Vento Homeless Children's Act. And lastly, I move to authorize the superintendent or his or her designee to serve as the district's designated coordinator of Michigan Public Act 25 of 1990 requirements.
Could I get support, please?
Support.
Roll call vote. Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Passes unanimously. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Becky?
So we've already discussed the meeting schedule, which is on the consent agenda. We also have the following things. Move to renew the membership. Is that on there?
They were listed on the other sheet as things to review. So this is just the consent where they're all listed again.
Right. There's the specific board memberships, though. Are those in the consent agenda, the MASB and all that?
Mhm.
Okay, my apologies. I didn't see that on the list. So we have the organizational items being that the new meeting schedule, which of course will be present on our website. We also have a move to renew membership in the Michigan Association of School Boards for the 2021 school year at a cost of $5,363. A motion to renew the membership with the Social Equity Caucus for the 2021 school year at a cost of $1,000, which is based on student membership count. Also a movement to renew membership in the Michigan High School Athletics Association for the 2021 school year. And to authorize the superintendent or his or her designee to apply for a continuation of the district's participation in the National School Lunch and Special Milk Program for the 2021 school year.
Support.
Roll call. Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent passes. Becky, did you have the minutes from our last regular board meeting in the consent agenda? Did I miss that?
You know what? It was not on there, but that was part of the consent agenda as well as the check registry. My apologies.
No problem. Let's do a motion and get those properly approved then, please.
Here it is. It was at the bottom of a different sheet. I hereby move to approve the consent agenda, which includes the following items: the 2021 board meeting schedule and board memberships as stated, minutes from the regular board meeting of June 22nd, 2020, and the June 2020 monthly check registry.
Support.
Roll call. Becky?
Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Passes unanimously. And we have action items again, which I did not notice. We did not have any further action items, so let's move on to the superintendent's report.
Just a couple more things beyond what I've already talked about tonight, the preparedness plan. The Building Futures Committee will have another meeting prior to our next board meeting, so I'll be reporting on that. That committee is doing a lot of work away from the table, asking me lots of questions. I've had several conversations. They're very interested, very concerned about getting good information. So I'm really happy with the group of people that we've put together in the way that they're taking this seriously. So expecting a real positive outcome from that group. As I mentioned earlier, got a candidate that we're going to begin talking to about accepting our business manager position, someone with a good deal of experience in similar position in other districts. So that's exciting. The first thing that person will be doing, aside from talking to the board about budget amendments, if we do have more budgetary detail from the state government, but they'll be filling out the hires in their office concerning HR, payroll, and accounts payable and receivable. And this person has experience in all of those areas, so pretty confident they'll come up with a good plan. We're hoping to be in our new location at the high school in our new offices, probably the last week of July, first week of August, as the high school gets prepared to move the counselors out and move our group over there. So just a couple more weeks in this building. Some of the items, CLC and Learning Cove and things like that, they're going to be able to leave things in here to be stored. We're not going to do a hard shutdown of the heat so that the pipes freeze. So the things that are here that are stored will be able to stay here until the building gets sold or something else happens with this building. The Learning Cove, they provide services to second and third grade students. So it's still a pretty good location for kids to walk across from Compass if we're in person. If, of course, we're not in person, then they may consider performing their services online. But they do have a place where we could kick up the heat for a couple hours in the afternoon on the Wednesdays that they service our kids. So like I said, the heat won't be totally off, but it'll be greatly reduced. And then earlier we talked about some of the handbook changes and the guest on our comment area suggested trainings for implicit bias. And I want to make a mention that we have a voluntary book study going on this summer for all of the employees in the district. We will purchase the book and have conversations in small groups having to do with the subject of implicit bias. And then we have about a 90-minute online training that will take place in those PD days before the school year, also relating to the topic of implicit bias. So it's definitely an interest that an issue that we're interested in and concerned about. And the school system has always been a place where kids should feel safe and receive equal treatment, regardless of any circumstance or otherwise. So we're moving forward with that. I think the number one thing having to do with bias of any kind is education. And as educators, it behooves us to make sure that we are up to date in our understanding of how bias affects our lives. So those things will be happening before the kickoff of the school year. That's all I have to report on, aside from the topics we've already discussed.
All right, thank you, Rick. Items for the next agenda, we have our 2020 and 2021 district calendar. We have action items, which include the Michigan Safe Schools Return to School Roadmap, the COVID discussion. We have the building handbooks for approval, the child care handbooks, and the district Chromebook policy should be buttoned up and ready to be approved. That'll bring us to our last public comment, which we did not have any registrants for, which rolls right into our board member comments and discussion. Any board member comments or discussion? Any of them? Anybody? Suzanne?
I would like to thank Griff and Rick for an awesome graduation celebration. It was just very, very good. I mean, it was hot, it was a little windy, but it was an awesome job, and it was very well done, and the staff stepped right up to the plate, and I was glad to be part of it. It was really, really good. Really awesome. And thank you.
I'll accept that on behalf of Griff and his folks. They did most of the work.
And
Thank you.
I would definitely second that emotion.
Yeah, there you go. Very funny, Becky.
Oh, it was a great
Indeed,
job.
the
I'm very
graduation.
impressed. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
The graduation felt as close to normal as it could possibly have felt. It was a very welcome
Did.
cap to the
Yeah.
school year.
Yeah.
I think one thing that it outpaced its traditional rival was the ability for the parents to come right up to the podium for a photograph.
You know,
That's not
that's
typically what
the-
happens in graduation, and I think people really got excited by that.
No, and you know what? I've been to a lot of concerts where they have a photo line. And you might want to consider that when we move back indoors next year, hopefully. That you
Right.
might want a photo line for the parents.
Yep.
Get a picture of their kid.
Yep, it was fun. It was
It was very fun.
equally gratifying. I could see the smiles through the masks on the kids, and I could tell the look on the faces of the parents was just ecstatic. So it was wonderful to be there.
No, it was definitely a great job by all.
All right, that brings us to our last item tonight, our adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned at 8:48 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.